Howdy there, I'm Keith Harmony with Kansas State University Research and Extension, and I'm here to talk to you today about tree and brush encroachment in our native rangelands. Right now I'm standing out here in the western part of Kansas in some native grassland, and looking in the background you may be able to see some things on the landscape that maybe weren't here 300 or 400 years ago. If we look across our Kansas rangelands, some of the things that we see now might be power lines, roads, fences and fence posts, and some things that have to do with energy development. A lot of those things, well, all those things weren't here, but we see them on our landscape today. One other thing that we see on our landscape today that wasn't here were tree and brush. Our native rangelands are predominantly warm season native grasses with an understory of forbs and other plants in them. For our areas of Kansas that don't have much for trees or brush on the landscape now, those places predominantly have been utilizing fire across the landscape to keep trees at bay. That regular fire going across the landscape has been able to control small saplings and little seedlings that have tried to get established. By doing that, a lot of the trees and brush that are non-sprouters will effectively be controlled, especially some of the smaller trees, in particular eastern red cedar. Fire is one of the best ways to keep eastern red cedar from encroaching into our native grassland areas. And if those seedlings and saplings do get started, and they do grow up into mature seed-producing trees, that places that grassland under risk of dispersing that seed and then having more area become invaded with new seedlings and saplings. So what if we do have grassland areas that have become invaded with trees and brush? What are some things that we can do to mitigate that? One of the things we can do is to introduce fire back into that landscape. And we can use that fire then at regular intervals to help reduce the number of trees that we have and prevent new seedlings from starting and establishing. If we have some areas that have mature trees that have started to colonize the area, there are some methods that we can do to help control those trees other than fire and browsing. We have some mechanical methods that can be used and some chemical methods that can be used. Cutting that tree off below the lowest living branch will effectively control that tree. Using a loppers on small trees or using a chainsaw on larger trees, we can effectively control them without using any herbicide. For brush species out in pasture, we can also go in and do a mechanical treatment, mow those brush species off. When we do that at a time of year when they have fully expanded their leaves, they've used a lot of their carbohydrate reserves in order to produce that leaf material. So we're able to take that species and we're able to deplete the energy status of it and effectively help to reduce its population. Mowing areas of brush in consecutive years can really reduce the stand and enable grasses to grow back up into that stand. That area then is able to have material in it that's going to be able to carry a fire much better if reintroducing fire back into that landscape area. Trees that we want to leave standing, instead of cutting those trees down, we have some individual tree methods that we can also utilize. We can do what's called a frill or girdle treatment, in which a hacksaw, an axe, or a chainsaw can be used to cut through the bark around that tree, and then a herbicide is placed inside of that cut area. And the tree will then translocate that herbicide also to its growing points and kill the tree. For trees, instead of brush in which we're using a herbicide on, we're able to mechanically treat those trees. And when we cut those trees down, we can treat the outer portion of that stump that's left on a tree, the cambium layer, the living part of the tree, and the tree will carry that herbicide to its growing points and buds and will effectively kill or control that tree. We can also treat trees while they're still standing without any mechanical means done to them. A basal bark treatment on some trees that are 6 inches in diameter or less, using a herbicide in an oil carrier to carry that herbicide through the bark into the growing portion of the tree. For some trees, we also have the option of doing a foliar treatment, where we're able to use a herbicide to treat the leaves of that tree. We do that early in the spring, once the leaves have fully expanded on many species. And with some herbicides, we can even do that clear into the fall, as long as the leaves are still green and photosynthesizing. We can use that foliar treatment on large trees or on smaller trees, just like what we would do with treating some of our invading species, such as musk thistle and other noxious weeds. We can use a herbicide treatment where we're treating the leaves of those small trees with the same herbicides that we're using on our noxious weeds. We can effectively control a lot of those small, young trees that have tried to establish in our pastures. So we do have many control methods that we can use to reduce trees and brush on our native rangelands. We have prescribed burning. We have mechanical treatments. We have herbicide treatments. And we also have grazers and browsers that can be used. One thing that we for sure want to do is we want to scout our pastures and look for any young trees that may be trying to start and get established out in our grasslands that seem to be tree-free at the moment. We don't want those to get established and become mature seed-producing trees. We want to reduce that risk and keep that seed off of our landscape. By reintroducing fire, along with these other methods that I just mentioned, we're able to keep our grasslands dominated by grass and to keep those trees and brush from encroaching. I hope you were able to get some useful information out of this video. I wish you much success for all the tree and brush control plans that you have in your future. So thanks again for joining me. I'm Keith Harmony with K-State Research and Extension.